Welcome to the latest episode of With That Being Said. I am JR Bang, and this is a special episode. For those who know me and you've heard this podcast, you know I am simply about learning. In these cases, it's not about debating, it is not about who I feel is the best and all of those things. I simply like to learn. First episode, you heard me and my wife talking about TV, and I learned a lot from talking to my wife about TV. The second episode, we talked about the Nas and Jay Z debates and how I was always on the Jay Z side, and all of my homies was on the Nas side. But I got to find out songs from Nas that people should listen to instead of being regurgitated the same ones to listen to. So shouts out to my homie Cam Quotes. Now in this episode, we're talking about Chicago sports. I feel like that Chicago sports is in a renaissance, so to speak. Caleb Williams, Caleb Wilson, Patrick Kane is back with the Blackhawks. Like, who would have thought that would happen? The White Sox had the number one pick in the MLB draft, and they're one of the surprise teams, if not the surprise team this season. The Cubs, MVPCA. Like, there's so much stuff that's going on in Chicago sports. But I wanted to talk about the people or the things in Chicago sports that we probably should talk about a lot more. Those underrated people, those underrated moments. And it took me back to this book right here, Why We Root. And my name is in this book, ladies and gentlemen, just a shameless plug, not just for the book, but for me. But my man who was with me on this show, when I first met this man about 15 years ago, when I think about it, we was at the Jared Payton show, and we were talking about sports, and I quickly realized that if there's somebody that knows way more about sports than me, it is this man, and that's why you have the book, Why We Root, Mad Obsessions of a Chicago Sports Fan. My man Jack Silverstein is in the building. What's good?
What's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm all right. And this reminds me of those conversations that we was having at the Jared Payton show at chicagolandsportsradio.com. In fact, I talked to some of my old students, or I talk about people in this business, and they be like, yo, what have you done? And I'm kind of quiet about the stuff that I've done before I was hired to my job, but then they quickly found out some of the things that I've done. They're like, wait a minute, including a podcast called Don't Press Send.
Yeah, that was going to be legendary.
Yes, but and thinking about what podcasting has gone from then till now, me, you, BC, Brian Crawford, Sean Davis, and everything. We recorded a couple episodes. I think it was one with Chuck Swirsky
One with Chuck
and everything.
and
Yep.
one other way. It was two. Yeah.
Yeah. So we look, things happen, but we've been doing this since y'all even realized what podcasting was, and I'm happy to have you on the show, man. So talk to me about this book. Like, I've went through this book and learned a number of things. And a number of things was from your blog, readjack.com. You
Yeah.
have a shot of Elo, which I'm subscribed to as well. You get $5 from me every month from the Substack and everything. Like, why this book? And talk about where that fandom came from.
Yeah. So I love collections. I love writer collections. So, columnists, essayists, you get all their best work together. And I've got a number of them on my bookshelf. And of course, now that I'm looking, I'm not seeing, all right, here's a perfect example, maybe a little too on the nose almost, but this was one of the great Mike Royko collections, maybe his most famous collection. And this collection of his columns runs through chronologically, and that's obviously one way to do it. A lot of other collections that writers put out, they run through by topic. What I wanted to do was I wanted to take my whole archive, this massive collection of work, for about 25, 30 years, and I wanted to take all the fan voice pieces and not the historian voice pieces, all the pieces of me as a fan. And I wanted to put a collection together, but I wanted to do it so that the sequencing was in the emotional evolution of a fan. So all the stories at the beginning are all related to learning your teams. Figuring out, all of a sudden you see that adults are behaving totally differently than you've ever seen them behave. All of a sudden, all the rules are out the window. And, it was at my house growing up, no TV after dinner, except if the Bears or Bulls are playing, if you had finished your homework. No, we wouldn't yell except if we were watching a game. You would never see people outside in winter without anything less than a coat, unless you were at Soldier Field and 3 20-year-olds are, 6 in, and now they're shirtless at a December, week 15 game.
Man.
Just seeing all these things and going like, why? I thought there were rules and what's going on? So the beginning of the book is all stories about, the beginning of your fandom and learning your teams, learning your opponents. And then as it goes on, it gets to a section called Heartbreak. And then all of like the worst games and moments that we all went through are in here. And then it goes to like building up your resistance and your tolerance, and then trying to figure out, are we ever going to win? And then at the end of the book is all the wins. So I love this idea of a collection. I wanted to put one out, and I also had this great cover. So I had done a project that I was working on in 2005, and my friend Ben Schwartz and I went out in the first week of January in like 08 or 09, and we went to Wrigley in the snow, and we took this picture. And my friend Ben took the picture, and then he photoshopped the Wrigley marquee to spell out the title of the book and to put my name up there. I was absolutely freezing. I couldn't close my hands. There was a Starbucks at the time across the street. I remember I just was shaking and went into the Starbucks after the shoot. I'm wearing one item of clothing for every team, with these red sweatpants kind of filling in for the Bulls and Hawks, but I've got another Bulls thing on here. And I didn't end up using that project, but I kept telling my friend Ben over the years, I would say, save that picture, save all the files, and I will come up with a book to go with this cover. Because it looked great. It was too good. So I know you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but I encourage everyone to judge my book by its amazing cover.
Oh yeah, no.
Thank you to Ben.
No, that first of all, with me going to some of the coldest games in Soldier Field history, like when talking about sports memories, my first Bears game was against the Philadelphia Eagles.
Okay.
I want to say it was 95. Bill Romanowski was playing linebacker on the Eagles that time.
Okay.
It was cold as hell.
Yeah.
The next game after that was against the Ravens. It was, I want to say it was Dave Wanstead's last home game.
You were at the James Allen game.
Yes, the James Allen game. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
The James Allen's game. But then after that, and now thinking about it, all of my Bears games, exception for one, have been weather games. Then I go to the Dicker game, the coldest game in Soldier Field history, Monday Night Football, the Dicker game, Bears against the Cowboys. Alshon Jeffrey goes wild that day, but I only stay till halftime. Like literally, when you see Mike Dicker say, "Bear down," I'm gone. Me and my homie is gone. Then it's the Justin Fields rain game against the 49ers.
Yep.
The Browns game this season and the epic Green Bay comeback. So for the exception of the Carolina Panthers Thursday game, a couple of seasons ago, all of my Bears games have been weather games.
That's crazy. And that's crazy that you were at that Browns game last year. That was, I mean, the Dallas one, these are all, the coldest game that I was at, I'm looking for the picture right now, there were several years in a row where it was going to be Favre's last game,
right.
Where it was like he was going to be retiring, and they were all cold. The last one was 07 in the broken season, but we pulled one out whipped that ass 35-7. And that was a freezing cold game. We had later that day, my two of my friends, the three of us went, and our friends, one who's a Packers fan and one who's a Bears fan, were getting married that night. So we went to that game, Bears Packers, and then went to their wedding, and there we are. You can actually see the snow whipping past us, and I'm wearing, as you can see, those thin black gloves, like the little grippers.
Man, I know your fingers was falling off of your hands. So when I told my wife that a lot of my memories of things are strictly about moments.
Yeah,
And if you give me that moment, I could tell you damn near what I was doing that entire day. I
yeah.
could tell you at that Eagles game, I made the dumbass decision to get nachos. At the Dallas game, I made the dumbass decision to drink a pint of Hennessy thinking it was going to warm me up, and it
Fair.
did not. But then getting a Mai Tai and it freezing once we get outside of the stadium. And at the Browns game, me and my cousin making the decision to stay for the entire game. But when the sun starts to move, we're like, well, should we? But man, Miles Garrett might make some history. So let's just go ahead and stay.
Mm-hmm.
But also, my memory for sports when I'm younger, my first sports memory is Walter Payton's last game. That is my that
Wow.
is my first memory of football, and looking at my father being sad as hell. Like, yo, why you this sad? Not realizing that that's Walter Payton's last game, and seeing him on the sideline sitting with
Yeah.
his head in his hands. When the Bears lose to the Washington Redskins. In fact, Doc Walker, who was a former Washington Redskin, I ended up working with him in D.C. And I told him
Oh.
about that moment, and he was like, "That's your first moment, Chi-Town?" He said, "Chi-Town, that's your first moment?" I was like, "Yeah."
Shut
He's like,
down.
"I'm glad that your first moment is us whooping the Bears' ass, because I did not know that the Redskins really hated the Bears that bad." Then basketball. My first basketball memory is watching WGN, and I know it was actually Channel 32 WFLD, and seeing Michael Jordan score 69 points. But the first time I'm really a fan of sport, and I'm not even a Cubs fan anymore for a great reason for me, is the 1988 Cubs and them going to the playoffs against the NLCS against the San Francisco 49ers. That's the first time.
The Giants, buddy.
I mean, the Giants, excuse me.
And 89, 89.
There you go. That is the first time I'm really like, okay, sports is cool,
Mm.
because now I'm playing Piggy, and now I'm naming players. I'm Mark Grace, I'm Sean Dunston, I'm Luis Salazar, I'm all of these random people.
I was Jerome Walton.
Ooh.
That was my guy.
That now, and see, that's what I'm like, now I'm that. Now I'm really into sports. And now I want to be a baseball player. Now I want to be a football player. And now I'm going to my uncle's house with my father to see games. And now I'm really paying attention. And then that takes me to the Super Bowl, the Giants versus the Bills. And that's the first time that I even bet on a football game, where
Oh.
finally, shouts out to my childhood friend DeAndre Neal, finally gave me the $5 that he's owed me since that Super Bowl a couple of years ago. So that is how my trajectory of really getting into sports is. But
Yeah.
as I was telling you before we started, the Chicago Sting, my cousin had a poster there. Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler. My cousin had a photo of that on his wall. Now I'm starting to think about things. Now, as a Chicago sports fan, now I'm learning about all of these players, but even to this day, I am still learning about the Blackhawks in the 80s in
Mm-hmm.
Savard. I'm learning about the White Sox. And it's 1984. I'm, a couple of years old. I
Right.
know nothing about the 84 Cubs. And that's why this episode is important. How do you become a Chicago sports fan? What is your introduction to that?
Yeah. So I think my introduction is probably the same as yours and as most people, which is just family. And this was something that was important. It feels wrong to say on the same level as our as religion, but really, like, when I think about the things that we did as a kid, I don't really see a line between Passover Seder and watching the Bears, because we got together as family and there were certain rites: Passover, um, Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, and people's birthdays. And sports was just part of that whole world. So I don't really like draw a distinction, which is, right, wrong. Let's not moralize about it. As a kid, I don't. I'm just like, these are the reasons we get together with family.
Yeah.
Someone had a birthday, we had a holiday, someone graduated, someone got married. Uh, the Bears are on. Bulls are in the playoffs. Cubs are in the playoffs. Whatever. And even I remember them like intersecting, like um, being at synagogue, and I don't remember what we were there for because it wasn't my temple. So what must have been something for my cousin, but it was in '89, and I remember talking to like one of my uncles about the Cubs, and they're on the rise and talking about players. And it was the first time I like knew enough about players to really be able to discuss them in context. Because maybe I could have done it the year before, but we weren't in the playoffs the year before. So now this is like the first time that a Chicago baseball team is in the playoffs where I'm old enough to know how these conversations work. I mean, I remember being on the bima on stage at Temple during my bar mitzvah, and in there was a little, all the bar and bat mitzvahs. There's a little moment where the rabbi, it's just you and the rabbi on stage, and the rabbi's talking to you quietly. Everyone's in sanctuary,
Right.
but everybody's quiet. And in the audience, you're always sitting there going, "Oh, I wonder what the rabbi's saying to whoever." Like, cause go to all your friends' bar mitzvahs, and he was up there going, "I know you're ready to get home and watch Northwestern, but just need to tell you, did a great job today." It was like that kind of thing. Or I mean, an even funnier one was, we would have Hebrew school Tuesdays and Thursdays, and Tuesdays and Thursdays were big Little League games. They were like Little League nights. And in Evanston, everyone would play at James Park on the south side of Evanston.
Okay.
So we would all wear our uniforms to Hebrew school because we would go straight from there to James Park. So me and my friend Josh Engel were on the same team, and I remember we're in our uniforms, and Rabbi Noble calls over. "Oh, you guys got a game today?" I said, "Yeah," and he sort of said this, and I couldn't tell if he was being tongue in cheek or not, but he like brought us together for a prayer, and he was like, "Boys, like, may the Lord be with you today, and may you both get hits and not make any errors, and may your team win." And I said, like, "Thank you, Rabbi." And then I pointed at my friend Steve across the room. We're in blue uniforms and he's in a yellow uniform. I said, "We're playing Stevie Morgan's team." To be
Mm,
like, "You gonna pray for both of us?" So I just remember thinking that this was all like intertwined. And how do you become a fan? I mean, you just grow up in it.
yeah. I remember playing Little League baseball. Shouts out to Cubs Care Rookie League.
There you go.
Um, and that's how I became a White Sox fan. They, for everybody that did Cubs Care Rookie League, at the end of the season, they all go to Wrigley Field. And it rained that day. And so we were in the bleachers. So all of the players were supposed to come to each bleacher, like each row, to
Yeah.
talk to players. Nobody came to talk to us. No Cubs player.
Right.
But I won MVP of my team. And my father's coworker, he he gave my father third base like third base side tickets. and I forgot who we play. The White Sox played, but I remember getting the autograph from Ken Patterson,
Okay.
and that's when I became a White Sox fan. It's like that that guy talked to me. He signed my bat. I'm a White Sox fan, and I've been a White Sox fan ever since. And just how we started, and we both jumped, we did not know fireworks was coming after the game. Like I told my wife that our house was supplied with White Sox cups, those white 16-ounce cups, and
Yeah.
me and hey, let's go ahead and get these cups, blah, blah, blah. And then next thing you know, the fireworks come, and we jumped and everything. We was like, oh, and that's my first memory as a White Sox fan. My
That's great.
first sports hurt is also with baseball. That season, we won the first two games, lost five straight, won the final game to eke into the playoffs. We got to the semifinals. Some cheating happened. We lose. That was the first game we lost that season that I didn't cry, but I was hurt
Mm.
because we was right there.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds me of my first hurt when it comes to being a sports fan,
Yeah.
which don't happen really until I'm a grown ass man. It's the Chicago Bulls game versus the Miami Heat, game 5.
Yeah.
And, that,
That was icky.
and you want to know what makes this worse, Jack?
Was it I have the number in my head too. It was 18-3, wasn't it?
Um,
Wasn't the run that they closed us out on
yes,
18-3?
yes.
Yeah,
But
I wish that wasn't in there.
I want to say it was the third date with my now wife. My friend was like, "Yo," he worked for the team. He's like, "Yo, I got 2 tickets. You want to come?" I'm like, hell yeah! And I had just left her house, and I turned back around. Yo, we going to the Bulls game. Come on. I feel good. I'm taking her to the Bulls game. I feel like I'm somebody and shit. We about to win this game, and they go on that run, and I am pissed, Jack. You would have thought somebody stole my cat. I am yelling, talking about this is rigged, this is bullshit. I drop her off, I get home, and I'm like, yo, I think I might have messed this up. Because she just saw me through this whole process have sports hurt. And
Yeah.
I think that's very underrated when it comes to this side that we don't necessarily talk about a lot until it really happens. What was your first sport hurt? Did it happen as you was a kid? Did it happen with seeing family? Or did it happen maybe at an age for you? I know you detail it in the book, but talk about
Oh,
it.
1990 Eastern Conference Finals, Game 7.
Oh, wow.
Easy. Easy. That was the moment where I thought, well, what if they don't ever win?
Oh,
We were
damn.
at my friend Donnie Burba's house. Again, big collection of kids and dads. And probably some moms. Shout out to the moms. And they lost. And when they lost, I left the house.
Oh,
I was 8 at a friend's house in Evanston, but not my neighborhood.
you just walked out.
I
Like,
just
I'm tired of
walked
shit.
out and I just walked in the neighborhood, 8 years old, because I didn't want anyone to see me crying.
Mm.
And I was so upset. I thought, they have beaten us again, 3 years in a row. The worst people on earth, the Detroit Pistons. I have a line in the book, and it's not a joke. There were 2 villains in my life, like larger than life villains, and one was Saddam Hussein, and one was Bill Laimbeer. And
Ooh,
in my head, Saddam Hussein, all right, we've got the army dealing with that situation. Who do we have dealing with Bill Laimbeer?
damn.
And I also thought, I don't know where Iraq is, but Bill Laimbeer could get on I-94 and be here in like 4.5, 5 hours to terrorize us in person on the playground of
Wow.
Orrington Elementary School. I was like, I've driven to Michigan. I know where that is. So I was really, really hurt.
Damn.
And I had others over the years, but that was the first.
That was the one. Man, I want to say for that game, I was over my uncle's house, and we played basketball afterwards. I think my father was a halfway Bulls fan, and I was really a Bulls fan until I saw Gary Payton and Sean Kemp.
Oh,
Yeah, that I was a Bulls fan until I saw those two. And let's just say that when the Bulls played the Sonics in the finals and they beat them, my whole family cussed me out. Like both
oh,
sides of my family called me, was like, "See, this is what you get. Like, see what this is what you get." Um, but for that, I think for me, I always felt like Michael Jordan was going to win one. And when they actually won it against the Lakers, it was the first time that I saw. No, I don't remember in January 1986 when the Bears win the Super Bowl.
right.
I don't remember that, and don't and even can't even watch that game when they try to replay it back. I can't even watch that game. But in 1991, well, I've not dealt with sports hurt. I know how the city feels when we win. Now I know what's supposed to happen when we win. As far as a villain goes, I don't think I really have a true villain until LeBron James, like somebody that I actually hate, and it all culminates in what ended up happening. And
Yeah.
thankfully, my wife didn't look at me as some lame that just mad about a game. Now, the essence of this episode is really learning about underrated figures or underrated moments when it comes to Chicago sports.
Yeah.
We always talk about Michael Jordan and we always talk about Walter Payton and the Cubs, Ryan Sandberg, Mark Grace. There will never be a day that we will turn on a TV and you'll see a documentary or anything about Chicago and not hear about some of these people. You know, you even got posters of them all. But I'm a fan of learning about the moments that we should probably think about more because now it makes me go dig. Like I'm a person that once you send me down a rabbit hole, I am stuck there until I get to the end. And and you're that person that I need to talk to when it comes to that. Being, considered the foremost Chicago sports historian in the crib. So, Jack, it is time. Give me a person, place, thing, moment. Number one, in no particular order, what rabbit hole do I need to go down? What should be talked about or who should be talked about more? Number one.
All right, so the first one isn't quite a rabbit hole because we were around for it. But when you posed this to me, I thought about the gap between the impact and importance that the team or the individual had versus the amount of time people spend talking about them. So the first one, when I made my list, I made a bunch of things, but I had number one right at the top, 2005 White Sox.
Ugh.
The 2005 White Sox are one of the all-time great Major League Baseball teams. They have been playing Major League Baseball since 1876.
Yeah.
And think about how many teams there are over every season. There's only one champion per season. And then of all these champions, there's every champion is great, and I never take anything away, but there are different levels of like how good you were, and there's the '98 Yankees is a level, or like the 2020 last year's Dodgers is a level, or the 27 Yankees, etc. But the White Sox in 2005, they went wire to wire first place. They won the first game of the season 1-0. They won the last game of the season 1-0. They had several players who, even without a ring, would have been all-time great White Sox players, particularly Paulie and Burley. And then you had Frank at the end of his run, and then Ozzie. Then you've got all these players who had these incredible moments. You talk about moments, and what are these great Chicago sports moments? You can name any player. I bet there's 15 players on the 2005 White Sox where if you said their name immediately, moments come to mind. And it was just this blessed run. They did everything well. They did everything right. And, they smash the competition. They sweep the defending champion Red Sox. Then they go into the ALCS against a really, really good Angels team, that had just won 3 years earlier. And now they have Vladimir Guerrero. They lose game one in a close game and then roll off 4 straight complete games. 4 straight complete games. The White Sox won a playoff series 4 games to 1 and used one reliever the entire series for less than an inning. And then they go and they face the Houston Astros, and the Astros were like one of those teams like of the same era, like the Colts. Like they were a lot like the Colts team that beat us in the Super Bowl in the sense that it was a really good team. They had been staying in the hunt for a while. They'd never gotten to the World Series or the Super Bowl, and now this was their shot.
And they beat Atlanta.
The Astros.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Chris Burke.
Because I got a story about that.
So now they have this crazy pitching staff with Roger Clemens and Andy Pettit and Roy Oswalt, and the White Sox run through them. I believe the Sox in games 2, 3, and 4 was the first time that a team had won the World Series by scoring the winning run in like the 7th inning or later 3 times. And just amazing plays, amazing moments. The way that they get left off of lists or, great teams or championships in Chicago and things like that, it's terrible. So that gap between what they accomplished and the impact that they had and breaking their own drought and the way that they get talked about, that was number one. So it's not a rabbit hole, but it just deserves, like, as much as possible, we should mention the 2005 White Sox.
So I'm going to tell you why for me it's a rabbit hole. I moved. In 2005, I lived in Atlanta.
Okay.
And I remember I worked at Best Buy in North Point Mall in Atlanta. And I remember working in the appliance section and really having a back and forth with a number of people there because Atlanta fans just knew they were going to be in the World Series. They just knew it. Like, yeah, we're going. Yeah, don't even worry about it. When they lost, I never seen a space so quiet.
Mm.
Everybody left the store. It was so empty in that store. And I also remember the night that they won. Me and my homies were going to the club, and the White Sox just so happened to win, and we were pumping gas. And I yell out, "The White Sox just won the World Series." And we're outside in the gas station in Atlanta, jumping up and down like we just won the World Series, and everybody's looking at us crazy.
Yeah.
But because I lived away, that's probably the experience of a championship team that I loved, I hate the most, because I was not there in the city to experience it.
That's funny. I wasn't either. I was living in Indianapolis at the time.
See? So it
and
sucked.
Same thing. And I remember I got on the phone with my mom, and we lived in Wilmette. I mean, I didn't because I lived in Indy, but like where my parents were. And my mom said she went outside. She goes, "There's people shooting off fireworks." She goes, "Hold on," and she goes outside on the phone, and she goes, "They're shooting fireworks. They're shooting fireworks in Wilmette. This is great." And then she goes, "Oh, that one came by the house," and she went back inside. It was electric, but it was a different experience not being at home for a title.
Right.
Yeah.
And yes, I hate seeing ESPN not acknowledge the 2005 White Sox. Like it's dumb as hell. Like we brought one home, but
Right.
That is the one sports moment that I hate because I did not get the chance to experience it. And seeing people back home, hearing my father, who's a White Sox fan, of course, taking me to that game, and we finally getting one, and I'm just sitting there in Atlanta at my house, just like, oh man, y'all having fun, huh? And then going back to work and nobody to celebrate this with.
Yeah.
In fact, they're mad at you because they're always the bridesmaid. They're never the bride. And at the time, they was only the bride once. They felt like they should have beat the Astros. They lose. They're quiet. Now they seeing me celebrate. They don't want to see me celebrate. They don't want to see me have a good time. So I couldn't enjoy it. I love and hate that moment at the
Mm.
same time because I was not able to experience it. And even some of those moments, I don't have those moments because if I'm looking at sports, I'm looking at the damn Braves games. I'm not necessarily being able to look at us until we get to the World Series. And the night they won, I'm at a damn gas station in Marietta, Georgia, getting ready to go into Vegas nights. That's my vent for that.
I like it.
Um, that's my vent for that. But I do
All right.
love that moment. What
Yeah.
do we have for number two?
All right. Number two, J.R. Bang. What Chicago sports team has achieved the most in our lives, was the most iconic, really changed the culture, won the most? What team would that be?
Oh, that's only the one and only Chicago Bulls.
Who founded the Chicago Bulls?
Ooh. Um, damn it. I just read up on this a couple of weeks ago because I guess this person was like a GM for another team and they became an owner. I cannot tell you the name though.
And that is a right shame, because we should know more about Dick Klein, who founded the Chicago Bulls. Dick Klein was an athlete. He played basketball at Northwestern. He also played for the Chicago American Gears, a professional team, and he also played briefly for the Cleveland Indians. Now, Chicago basketball was big, but professional basketball was failing. And we had several runs at having a pro team in Chicago. So we had, I mentioned the American Gears,
Yep.
and they were the first team that won a championship in an organized way, and we lost them, and that's a terrible story. They won a championship in 1947 with hometown legend George Mikan,
Mm.
and the owner of the American Gears in the league called the National Basketball League decided he wanted to be in charge of the National Basketball League. And when the other owners were like, no, you can go right over there, sir, with your trophy, he took the Gears out of the NBL and tried to found a new league, which failed. And when that league failed, the Gears went under, and George Mikan and all the other players on the Gears were basically put out in what amounted to a dispersal draft. And that's how George Mikan ended up on the Minneapolis Lakers.
What?
We could have had George Mikan in the city of Chicago, where he was from. So we had that team that
Because he went to
failed.
DePaul.
Went to DePaul, yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but at that time drafts was like regional or
Um,
something like that.
yeah, but so mostly drafts were a little bit weirder. Like the NFL draft started in 36, and it was a real draft, but they had regional picks like at the start of the draft. So there were some weird things like
Yeah.
that. So we had that team that folded. The NBA is NBA, National Basketball Association.
Association.
The National Basketball part comes from that league, the National Basketball League, and the A comes from the Basketball Association of America. And those two leagues came together and
Man.
became the NBA. We had a team in the BAA called
Wow.
called the Chicago Stags. They lost the first ever BAA championship, which the NBA now counts as their first championship. That's a whole nother story. But we had this team, the Stags. They played for a little while, and then they folded. Then we had a team called the Chicago Packers in the early 60s. And after 1 year, the owners were like, you know what? We probably shouldn't have a team in Chicago called the Packers. They changed the name to the Zephyrs.
Ah, yes.
And then that team failed in Chicago and relocated out to Baltimore and became the Baltimore Bullets, who became the Washington Bullets, who became the Washington Wizards. 3 years later, Dick Klein of Northwestern gets the money together, gets a group of investors together, and creates the Chicago Bulls. And there was no guarantee that basketball, professional basketball, was going to stay in Chicago. it was a hard time. There was an article at the start um, of the Bulls run. This is October 9th, 1966, and the headline was "Pro Basketball: Chicago's Last Chance." And
Good.
the article included the line, "Chicago, it has been said, just isn't a basketball town." Now that's an insane thing for us to hear, and there was already basketball going on, but in terms of the professional in terms of these leagues, Chicago was failing. And so Dick Klein came along and got the Bulls going. He hired Red Kerr as the first coach. Then he got rid of Red Kerr and he hired Dick Motta.
Mm,
And Dick Motta reshaped the whole operation.
everything.
The Bulls ownership, the rest of the owners, like the primary investors, didn't like Dick Klein after a little while. They got rid of him and they got a young guy from the 76ers named Pat Williams, who
Ah,
we grew up knowing Pat Williams from the Orlando Magic when he won the
right.
lottery 2 years in a row. Pat Williams then and Dick Motta built a Bulls team that made noise, that became a power in the Eastern Conference, had 50-win seasons, had two Eastern Conference,
Eastern or
excuse
Western
me, sorry,
Conference?
Western Conference. I'm sorry
I
about
just
that.
want to make sure.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Sorry about that. Western Conference, two powerful seasons in the Western Conference Finals, and of course, this is Jerry Sloan and Norm Van Leer and Bob Love and Chet Walker. Those four guys in particular. By the time MJ got drafted, all right, the year before MJ got drafted, only seven of the 23 NBA teams were profitable. It was still a time where things aren't going great. But if you think about Michael Jordan and the Bulls, let's say Portland had drafted MJ, and let's say we got Charles Barkley, and Charles Barkley's time on the Bulls played out the way his time with the Sixers did. I don't think we would have necessarily relocated just because
Right.
we didn't get MJ. MJ put the franchise obviously to a level that they've skated on it in many respects for the last 30 years, where you can still make money today and still fill the seats today off of Michael and Scotty and Phil and everybody. But if we hadn't gotten Michael, I don't think necessarily that we would have lost the franchise. Like the franchise wouldn't necessarily have moved. I mean, there was a chance, but it wasn't a major chance. But if the team hadn't succeeded a decade before in the 70s,
There we go.
that was a real chance that team could have folded or moved. So Dick Klein is the guy who got Chicago basketball, professional basketball, to stick in Chicago, and his decision to figure out how to create this team, and he named the team the Bulls, and then his decision to hire Dick Motta as head coach, and then the contribution that Pat Williams made, and then those four players. But Dick Klein is the founder of the Bulls. I was happy when they put him in their Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
But the Bulls should have a banner up for Dick Motta, and they should have a banner up for Dick Klein. Dick Klein founded the Chicago Bulls, and if you want to talk about rabbit holes, I mean, that's a name that we don't really know and we don't really talk about, but he's the reason we were able to get to MJ.
That's so. It's funny because, like you're saying, is I actually got chills a little bit, um, because that's a name that you don't hear. The other part about that too is, even from a personal standpoint, talking about rabbit holes, we found part of my family through ancestry.com, right?
Yeah.
And apparently, my grandfather tried out for the Chicago Stags.
Oh,
Apparently, they said, according to him, the day we first met, he said that he tried out for the Chicago Stags, but his knee was busted.
okay.
He ended up being funny thing about it is he ended up becoming a mailman, and his work as a mailman ended up meeting my grandmother, and she gets pregnant. So, and my auntie
You're here
is
because of a bad knee.
I'm here because of a bad knee during a bad tryout, and somebody becomes a mailman. But no, like We don't even talk about the Bulls in the 70s. We don't even talk about
Right.
those teams like that. Because if my memory serves me correctly, yes, some of those, like a couple of those teams went to the Western Conference Finals
Too, in
against,
74 and 75.
right.
Yeah.
So, and,
This right
and
here is a great book. Bob Logan was the Bulls writer for the for the Tribune. He was like his generation Sam Smith,
oh, wow.
and this book is terrific. The reason that I laughed at that, Chicago is not a basketball town, obviously
Man.
because that's crazy for us to hear, but
Yes.
also uh, much of a huge piece of history of basketball came right
It's,
through Chicago with Wendell Phillips High School. So I mean,
right.
this is another great book, The Black Fives, and but yeah, the idea that Chicago, you know, was not a basketball place. I mean, it's crazy. And I'll tell you another really good one. Um, I'll have to pull this up, but there was I think it was not over 1 week, but in the month of April of 1947, we had two basketball teams in championship series. We had the American Gears winning the NBL, and we had the Chicago Stags runners up in the BAA. The two leagues that came together to form eventually the NBA a few years later. So, but yeah, so Dick Klein founded the Bulls, and without his efforts, and he hired Dick Motta. Without Dick Klein, Dick Motta, and Pat Williams, and Jerry Sloan, Norm Van Leer, Bob Love, and Chet Walker, and those four players in particular, without those seven people, we might not have gotten Michael Jordan, because that team could have easily folded in the 70s. If they had failed again, if we had seen pro basketball fail again in Chicago, that could have been it.
Yeah, that's not only a wild story. Tell everybody, dig into Paul's those players. Like even
Yeah.
Artis Gilmore. Like my middle name
Yeah.
is Artis, and that is
Ooh.
yeah, and not named after him because that's my father's middle name. At the same time, when I saw a basketball player named Artis, I was like, okay, I need to dig into the history of this person and seeing his work in the ABA and with the Chicago Bulls and being one of the greatest rebounders of all time. Like, yeah, people need to talk more about the Chicago Bulls instead of what happened from 1984 to 1998 and even in the Derrick Rose years. I will be digging into that because that story right there in itself, and hearing that Chicago is probably not a basketball town, the way it sounds is Chicago, when it comes to basketball, was like the city of St. Louis when it comes to football. So this is wow, that's crazy
Yeah,
in itself.
I think that's a better example. Like basketball probably would have come back to Chicago. Like the NBA probably would have taken another shot on Chicago, but maybe it wouldn't have happened until the expansion time in the 80s, for example, or something like
Yeah,
that. Like would we have gotten an NBA team? Yeah, probably, but like we could have not existed when it came time to draft MJ.
yeah. Oh no,
Like that's possible.
we're probably coming in at the same time as the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Miami Heat.
Right. Right.
Like, yeah, that's
Absolutely.
that's probably what that is. Number three. What's that number three? That last one.
Number three, I was thinking about along the same lines as Dick Klein. We have some great pioneers. We had, I was talking about basketball teams before the Bulls. Well, there was a professional basketball team called the Chicago Bruins, coached by George Halas,
Huh?
one of the early basketball leagues, I believe, the first professional basketball league. And it was founded by Joseph Carr and some of the owners in the early NFL owners. But here are the people I was thinking of. All right. The same year that George Halas became the manager and player and soon to be owner of the franchise that would become the Chicago Bears, same year that he founded or was involved in the founding of what became the NFL, 1920, was the same year that Rube Foster, a Texan who had come through Chicago and made his living and pitching and as his star baseball player in Chicago and founded the Chicago American Giants. Rube Foster was one of the founders of the Negro National League, the what became the biggest Negro Leagues.
Oh wow.
And Rube Foster, there's a great box score, and I'll send it to you, of a game, because when George Halas went to work for the Staley Corporation or Staley Company in Decatur, he was coaching the football team, but he was also playing on the baseball team because these were company teams. And he played against Rube Foster's team that Rube Foster wasn't playing, but Rube Foster was managing. You got these like two titans of American sport, George Halas and Rube Foster, getting together on the baseball diamond. Halas homered. Rube Foster is someone who absolutely, I can't believe there isn't a biopic on him. You talk about an incredible figure, someone who was amazing as an athlete, and then as a manager, and then as a league president and league founder. Just an incredible figure in baseball history. He was eventually elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame 51 years, I think, after he died.
Right.
But Rube Foster, Chicago has a great history of, adopting people. MJ's not from here. Barack's not from here.
I will take you.
Right? Oprah's not from here. Studs Terkel's not from here. We'll take you. Right, exactly. Rube Foster, Texan. But he has a place in Chicago sports history, or really maybe the opposite. He's got a place in national sports history, but it comes through Chicago. Like MJ said, everybody comes through Chicago. Shout out to my guy Andrew Donlin. He comes through Chicago, and so Rube Foster is one of those figures who is just massive and definitely should be better known. People are like, well, why doesn't anyone talk about so and so? But I just say, well, don't say why doesn't someone talk about him, just talk about him. So Rube Foster is he's one of the titans of 20th century American sports, and he did quite a lot of his achievement was here in the city.
Yeah, that's crazy. And just even hearing that, and hearing George Halas on stuff outside of football. Like when you hear George Halas, you're always talking about the Bears and the history and the legacy there. But when you start hearing these people and they're in other sports, they're doing other things, like that is,
Yeah.
And when we're talking about Foster, like you're right, like but even when we look at like biopics and stuff, it is very, I won't say it's difficult. No, I would say it's difficult. I will say it. I'm a black man. I will say that it is difficult to get
There he is, 1924.
right. It is difficult because you could go from him to Fritz Pollard to Josh Gibson, who with now the MLB integrating Negro League stats is by stats the greatest baseball player of all time. When you have Satchel Paige, when you have all of these people, there's not a biopic for some or all of these people. And they have very interesting, beautiful stories that should be told that is not told, but should be told. And this story right here, I can tell you right now, I've heard a number of stories growing up and loving history. I've seen a lot of these. That's a story I have never heard or never even thought existed, which is part of the reason why I want to do this pod. Which is why I want to do this episode.
So along those lines, I mean, you mentioned Fritz Pollard. I was also thinking of, Fritz Pollard. I mentioned George Mikan. I mean, obviously we're loaded with historic figures, but in terms of like a titan of someone inventing things, so Rube Foster is obviously one, and then there's another huge one. Do you know this name?
No.
Arch Ward. Arch Ward was the sports editor for the Tribune starting in 1930 until his death in 1955. And Arch Ward played one of the most interesting roles in 20th century American sports, because what Arch Ward would do is he used his position first 1925 as a sports writer, and then starting in 1930 as the editor. He would use his position to create events that he wanted to see and report on. And then he would use his position uh, as the Tribune sports editor to then report on those events that he had created and to get them more publicity. Okay, here's what Arch Ward started.
Oh
He
shit.
he yeah. So I just want to make sure that I get these dates right. But Golden Gloves boxing already existed, but Arch Ward in 1928 drove the first inner city Golden Gloves battle between Chicago and New York, and then he brought Golden Gloves International and set up a bout or a series of bouts between Chicago and French boxers in 1931. And by 1936, because of all of his work in the amateur but international boxing game, Arch Ward was the coach of the U.S. Olympics boxing team in 1936, the Hitler Olympics. So he started that in 28 and 31. He didn't start Golden Gloves, but he was the first one to be like, I'm going to take this great thing and this great thing and put them together. That's what he liked. He liked to say, he basically was like, let's settle the bet. Let's settle the bar stool debate. Is it going to be this one or this one? What happens if this group plays this group, if this team plays this team? And that's what he liked to do. So in 1933, the World's Fair was coming to Chicago, and Arch Ward wanted to put together something that was really exciting for the sporting world. So he put together the first Major League Baseball All-Star game. Arch Ward, Tribune sports editor, founded the MLB All-Star game, because at the time, National League, American League, they only played in the World Series. So you would have all of these debates about, well, what would happen, if Babe Ruth was up against, I'm showing some of my ignorance here of who would the star National League pitcher would be. Christy Mathewson. Right. I don't think that he's a little too old, but they get into these debates. And Arch Ward used his position to get the first Major League Baseball All-Star game, and that was what kicked off the All-Star game. That's how it was founded. The first game was at Comiskey, and he used the Tribune to influence like who was going to be on the team and to like drum up support. And it was a problem because you already had the schedule laid out. You had to then get all of these players from around the country to the central location. Now it was useful that it was in Chicago, which was an actual central location, but you still had to get everyone to one place outside of the schedule that had already been written. But that was the first Major League Baseball All-Star game, was from a Chicago Tribune sports editor, Arch Ward.
Everything dope in the world comes from Chicago.
Dilla knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. See, and okay.
The next year,
shit.
There was this sort of residual coming off of the World's Fair, and Arch Ward wanted to do another thing. Now, here was another big debate at the time. Remember, the NFL started in 1920. Mm-hmm. Okay, it was under a different name, became the NFL in 1922. But it was started in 1920, and then you have these series of big moments. So obviously, a huge one is Red Grange. Red Grange came to the Bears in 1925, and Red Grange, that was the first year of the New York Football Giants. It said that Red Grange saved the Giants, that the receipts for their one game in early December saved the Giants, brought them out of the red. So the idea that Red Grange now was going to have this whole other career as a professional really changed the idea of what people thought about when they thought about football. But college football was still a much bigger deal. And if you read reporting of the day, in the 20s and the 30s, players who are veterans, even into the Luckman era, are still referred to by their college. Like later in Sid Luckman's career, they'd be like Sid Luckman of Columbia.
Right.
It'd be like right now, they'd be like Patrick Mahomes of Texas Tech. It'd be
Texas
like,
Tech, yeah.
why? Why are you saying that? Like he's been here a long time. So, okay. So 1933, Arch Ward starts the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, and then that just goes, and then that's what we have. So the next year, he's like, all right, we're going to settle this debate about who actually is better, the college kids or the pros, because that was still a debate. And what he started was, I've seen it listed under a number of different names, but he started I've seen it listed as the Chicago All-Star Classic or the College All-Star Game. I don't even know what the official name was, but you would just call it the College All-Star Game. And in August every year, the unofficial kickoff to the NFL season was the defending NFL champions against a college all-star team from the previous year. Mm. And almost all of those games were played at Soldier Field. So as I mentioned a few years ago, I did a little thing on it. We all know that Jackie Robinson famously debuted at Wrigley Field in 1947. Right. He debuted at Soldier Field 6 years earlier in 1941 as a member of the college football all-star team, playing against the defending champion Chicago Bears.
That's crazy.
Jackie Robinson ran a wheel route, and it was like the one highlight for the college kids in the second half when the Bears got going and blew them out. He blew by the defense and caught a touchdown pass against the Bears at Soldier Field. So Arch Ward got international Golden Globes. Well, first National Golden Globes boxing, and then International Golden Globes. He started the MLB All-Star Game, and he started the College All-Star Game, which ran into the 70s when finally they were like, all right, we can't have NFL players now in the Super Bowl era potentially getting injured against college kids. Like that can't happen anymore. But it was a huge event. Every August was the College All-Star Classic between the NFL champs and the college kids, all the All-Stars. And that was started by Arch Ward, the editor, the sports editor at the Tribune, to get more things to write about. So, two titans, that's my number three, Rube Foster and Arch Ward.
And I was low-key hoping you said something about boxing, because before Vegas, you fought in New York, you fought at Chicago Stadium.
Yeah.
Like big boxing fights happened in Chicago. In fact, I often told people, like, if I got money, I'll do this. But I'll definitely be like, yo, there's going to be a big boxing fight here in Chicago at the United Center, because people do not know how much of a hotbed boxing was in Chicago, and it started at the Chicago Stadium.
Yeah.
So that is something that I was hoping that you would say.
And it was also at Soldier Field, because the famous long count fight of 1927 between Tunney and Dempsey, where the ref took too long after what should have been a knockout, and that was at Soldier Field. And Arch Ward was one of the sports reporters there reporting on it. So, yeah, I mean, Chicago has an amazing boxing history, but we've got an amazing sports history in every respect. In name a sport. So those are my answers.
I knew this was going to be a dope episode. I've come away from this episode learning a lot. I come away from this episode wanting to learn more about some of the things that you've discussed, which then takes me to a rabbit hole to discuss more. We didn't talk about hockey. We didn't talk about the Cubs. We didn't talk about hockey. We didn't talk about race cars. We didn't talk about NASCAR. We didn't talk about a lot of things that has happened in Chicago soccer. We low-key talked about the Chicago Sting before we had this. There's a lot. If you could if you could put this in a bow when it comes to Chicago sports, and not just what it is like to be a Chicago sports fan or a historian, just as you, regular you, your family, everything that encompasses how you grew up into this. If you could put it into the bow, what does this mean to you? What does Chicago sports mean to you?
It is Chicago sports is a critical pillar of my personal identity. I view myself as an American and I view myself as a Chicagoan. And a big portion of why, I mean, I've lived here since 2007, but I grew up in the burbs. I grew up in Evanston and then we moved to Wilmette. So a big part of my, or the biggest part of my Chicago identity growing up certainly was fandom and was, being a part of these teams. Um, so it's hugely important to me. And Chicago is like an incredible history as sports fans. I mentioned that 1876 was the first year of the National League. So the first National League champion was the team that would become the Cubs. And then in 1901 was the first year of the American League, and the first champion of the American League was the White Sox. And then in 1920 was the first year of what would become the NFL, and nearly the champs were the Decatur Staleys. And then the next year, the Chicago Staleys won that league. And then, the Blackhawks started in 20. We're celebrating their 100th anniversary right now,
Right.
And they won in their first 10 years. So we have a history of teams, forming in these major leagues and winning quickly. And then, I mentioned Wendell Phillips High School and this book, The Black Fives, and you've got Buddy Young out of Wendell Phillips and the impact that he had on college football and on the NFL and on the AAFC. Oh, I forgot Arch Ward. Good Lordy. Okay. Arch Ward, then in the 40s, the NFL owners offered him the commissionership of the NFL. And instead of taking that, he founded his own football league called the All-America Football Conference. And that is the league where we got the Cleveland Browns and the San Francisco 49ers and the first run of the Baltimore Colts. And then they folded, and then there was a new Colts team. But the Browns and the 49ers came from the AAFC, which Arch Ward, again, still while the sports editor of the Tribune, Arch Ward invented a football league. And it outdrew the NFL because there was so much enthusiasm for sports immediately after World War II. So the first year of the AFC was 1946. And they were really duking it out, and that forced a merger between the leagues, or really the NFL absorbed the AAFC. But
And
this
that's
was
Y Tittle, 49ers, correct?
a little later. This is
Okay, a
this is
little bit later. Okay.
this is Frankie Albert 49ers.
Okay. See, I know a
But
little bit. I know a
yeah,
little
yeah,
bit.
yeah, yeah. But the Cleveland Browns, that's their formation. 1946, Paul Brown, Otto Graham, Marion Motley, and I mean, if you wanna keep going, this was the tail end of when the NFL was all white.
Yeah.
And the way that black players came back into the NFL was, well, first of all, there had been activists and organizers all throughout this ban between 34 and 45. But when Arch Ward started the AAFC and he got this team out of Cleveland with Paul Brown, who was already this legendary coach in Ohio, and this was crazy. So the Cleveland Rams won the NFL championship in 1945 and immediately moved to Los Angeles. It's the only time that a team has won a championship and then relocated.
We out.
And they were out because their owner had already wanted to move west, and he kind of used Paul Brown as like the excuse to be like, I don't know, this guy's going to come in and like mop the floor with us because he has this Ohio history. So they move to Los Angeles and they want to use the LA Coliseum, and now now activists and organizers in California, now they've got it, and they say if you want to use the LA Coliseum, which is a taxpayer funded stadium, then you need to integrate. And that is why the NFL, the new LA Rams, brought in Kenny Washington and Woody Strode, who of course were teammates at UCLA with Jackie Robinson, all in the same backfield. So that, not to like sit here and give credit to Arch Ward, because that's a crummy thing to do, but just looking at like the sequence of events, Arch Ward just has this outsized role in sports in the 20th century, in baseball, in football, and in boxing, and Rube Foster as well. So both of those guys, just these incredible figures. Everything dope comes from Chicago. I mean, these incredible figures who changed the world, because American sport influenced the entire world, influenced the culture, influenced economics, influenced everything. And so much of it came from Chicago. And I think it started because Chicago fans love sports. And we had these long histories of teams built up from the late 19th century, of teams building up and having passion and supporting these clubs and supporting these teams. The oldest NFL team, the only NFL team that stretches its history back to the 19th century, is the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah.
And they were called, they were the Chicago Cardinals, but before that they were the Racine Cardinals. And the original minutes of the first meeting, September 17th, 1920, the first meeting of what became the NFL, and listed out where all the teams were from, and it said Racine, Wisconsin, because they didn't realize that the Racine Cardinals were because of Racine Avenue, not because of Racine, Wisconsin. So the oldest NFL team, even though we look at you mentioned St. Louis and football, now, bring this back around, the Arizona Cardinals, the oldest team in the NFL, they go back to the 19th century, and that's in Chicago.
And that's crazy that if you were to ask somebody that right now, they would not say the Arizona Cardinals. They would not say that at all. But
Certainly not.
That's how much their history go back to. Jack, how we could get the book?
Yeah, so you can buy the book anywhere you can buy books. It's on Amazon, it's on Thrift Books, it's on Barnes & Noble. It is all over the place. So it's great. I really love it. I mean, like, I know you're supposed to like write for your audience and keep your audience in mind. And a lot of times when I'm writing, I just think of myself. I'm like, what would I love to read? Like what do I want what do I want to learn about? What's a story that I wish existed that doesn't exist? And I'll just write that story. But this was just an example of, me wanting to document all these emotions and all these experiences and all these moments that you and me and JP and SD and BC and everybody would get so riled up about at Chicagoland Sports Radio. And I'll tell a quick JP story, because Jarrett put out his announcement that he's stepping away from WGN to be with his family. And if you don't know Jarrett, you probably saw a lot of people commenting and, oh, JP, you're the best, etc. This is how good of a dude Jarrett Payton is. The studio that we were in was not much bigger than the space that I'm in right now. It's not much bigger than my bookshelf. I mean, it was a small studio. I think that bench was probably made for 3 people, and we would put 5 in there. Kyle, and Ernie Scatton, the dude that makes it happen. So, and then you were in the next room over, and then you would come in in commercial breaks. All right, so on commercial breaks, Jarrett Payton, I'm calling him Jarrett Payton so everyone knows who I'm talking about, but JP would stand up on these commercial breaks, and he would walk and he would hug all of us. He would hug Sean, and he would hug Ernie, and he would hug me, and he would hug Kyle or BC. He would hug you, but it was this small space, and JP obviously is the biggest of all of us, and he would walk by just because he wanted to like tell us how much he liked us and how much he appreciated that we were all there. And JP would, in this 3-minute commercial break, in a like a 10-foot closet of a booth of a radio studio would walk by and he would just bear hug us and he would just hug all of us. You couldn't even turn around to do it. He would just get like this and go, "I like you," you know, he'd give you a hug. So we appreciate JP and wish you all the best, buddy.
Oh yeah, no, he got the kids and they're doing well in sport. As we see, they look like they're some great kids, and I know the family is very excited to have him around for
That's
these
right.
next couple of years.
And you remember how
And,
we used to close that show out?
oh, oh man, now you
Turn
got me
out
thinking.
the
Lies,
lights.
the
The
party,
party's over.
man, yeah.
After you play that.
And it's great that my wife told me I got to think about those moments a lot more because of a lot of, I mean, moving from city to city and coming back home and being able to think about what got me there in the first place. That's also why this episode is special. And when we look at Chicago sports and where they're headed right now, like I said, Caleb Williams, Caleb Wilson, Rock, and Montgomery and Schultz and PCA and Matt Colston Loveland, Luther Burden. The list goes on and on. The Blackhawks and being able to see the old and the new together. It's a renaissance.
Yep.
I would hope, and when I say renaissance, I mean this for people older than us, but for us to see sustained success with all of our teams, oh man, this is something as the 44-year-old in me hope that my 12-year-old son get to experience in some of what I got to experience between 1991 and 1998. So, Jack, thank you. When I
I,
say thank, oh, go ahead.
I will end. I will end with a reading.
Let's go.
This is the story that I wrote the night the Cubs won the World Series.
Let's go.
Rooting for a team is frequently illogical. We pour ourselves into them even during horrific seasons. We stay dedicated during the 97 Bears and the
Yeah.
2000 Bulls and the '06 Hawks and the '89 Sox. This is where we is forged, where our metal is tested, where friendships are made. Chris Bryant matters because we remember the years where we trotted out a new third baseman every opening day. Anthony Rizzo's joy matters because we saw his loneliness in a 101 loss season. And I list a bunch of players, but I'll skip ahead here. Joe Madden matters because we were there for every new manager who said we're going to do it at his introductory press conference and left
Shouts
the
out to Jim
team
Lefebvre.
and left the team in disarray, wondering if he'd ever work again. I went to sleep last night and dreamed of joy. I awoke this morning and it's still here. I promise you this from the bottom of my heart. It will always, always still be here.
Great way to end this episode. Make sure you, because you got hacked and everything. I remember you got hacked. So how do the people follow you?
Yeah, it's game over for me on Twitter. That's fine. And then like a week later, I lost my Facebook password, and it's game over for me there. Um, so I'd say most importantly, I have a shot on Elo, which is my newsletter. So readjack.substack.com, where I'm working on my 90s Bulls book. Readjack.substack.com. I have a TikTok under readjack6 called Why We Root. I have a Chicago Sports History Instagram, also called The Shot on Elo, and I'm on Blue Sky on Read Jack. So those are the places.
Man, look, thank you for this episode. If you guys do not go down rabbit holes and look and for all of this information, then y'all already know what I'm gonna say about you. But I'll save it for off of the air. I am JR Bang, and with that being said, we're out.